Alright, guys. Obviously, I am not there today. A couple of things that you have that you're going to do. First, you're going to watch this video. If one of you would like to pop this video up on the screen so that you can watch it together, please feel free to do so. We are going to talk about the types of powers that are in the Constitution. And then there is a speech by Strom Thurmond posted in Teams. And there is a form that's also linked there that you can go ahead and respond to the questions to. You guys can feel free to help each other out if you get stuck. I would really appreciate it if you submit your own unique answers. So I don't necessarily want you doing it together, but use each other as a resource. Have a discussion. Talk through them. Couple of things. Don't forget that your journal is due tomorrow and your Federalist papers are also due tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow, so if there's any questions, please let me know. Also, if you have any trouble on the questions that are posted in the form, shoot me a Teams chat and I will do my best to answer them. All right, yesterday we talked about the division of power within our government, and we titled that Federalism, that belief that there should be two separate governments dividing the power between the state and the federal, and that was really to help push the anti-federalists to approve the Constitution because they were so scared that the federal government would take away all the rights of the people. We decided that we're going to have this division of power. That way the people's voice is still heard. But what we need to do now is take a look at what does that actually look like, because the Founding Fathers knew they couldn't just say, well, there will be a federal government and there will be a state government. They had to be really specific on what that looked like. So what they did is first, there are what we call delegated powers. Think about when you delegate out a task, you specifically give these. Delegated powers are the powers that the Constitution specifically gives to the federal government. Some examples of this. First, you have printing money. Under the Articles of Confederation, we gave every state the power to have their own money, and that was a mess because trading was not consistent. We didn't have the ability to easily trade with foreign countries. We didn't have the ability to easily trade with ourselves. So printing money is a federal power. Regulating interstate trade, which is spelled INTER, this kind of trade is from state to state. So if Maine wanted to trade with Virginia, the regulations would be set by the federal government. Somebody has to control these arguments between the states, and you don't necessarily want states playing favorites. One state may make easier trade agreements with another. So instead, the federal government steps in and they set all trade agreements between the states, and they also do it with foreign countries. We don't want one singular state making a trade agreement with an entire country. We want our country to seem united on a united front, so we do that at the federal level. Same thing with declaring war. The federal government does that. More specifically, Congress declares war with a majority vote. We don't want individual states declaring war. That would be very difficult to keep track of, but it also wouldn't present a united front if we were to go to war. The second set of powers that we have are reserved powers. Think of like when you reserve a table, you set it aside. These powers are set aside for the state government in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. These fall into the category of education. Think way back, maybe you don't remember, when Common Core was first starting to be implemented in the United States, some states opted out and they lost funding for that. But it was their choice. They didn't have to put Common Core in place. Also, when you take your New York State Regents, that is specific to our state. Other states take their own type of test. Every state determines it on their own. States also set what's called intrastate commerce, INTRA. This is the trade that happens within the state's borders. So if Cuba wanted to trade with Jamestown, that would be set by New York State. Those agreements, those regulations are set by the state government. Other state powers, traffic laws. If you have ever driven the length of the 90, if you get into Ohio, the speed limit gets much faster than ours. That's set by the state. If you go down south, same thing happens. The speed limit changes a little bit. Those traffic laws are set by the state government. Marriage and divorce, these licensing, these certificates are set by the state as well. There's different age requirements that are approved by the states. There's different grace periods for how long you have to have the certificate before you can get married. Health and safety regulations are set within the state as well, and professional licensing. This goes for doctors, for teachers, for anyone who has a certificate, a licensing of a sort. You can't just travel from state to state and practice whatever your craft is. You do have to get licensed within that specific state. So, for example, if I wanted to teach in another state, I would have to go through the licensing process for that state, whatever they required of me. The third type of power that we have here is concurrent. These happen at the same time together. So both the state and the federal government have the power to. And one of the easiest ones to remember is taxing. Both the federal and the state government collect taxes. If you've ever looked at your paycheck, and I highly recommend that you do, you will see that state and federal taxes are taken out. Another concurrent power is borrowing money. The states borrow money, the federal government borrows money. There are also roads and bridges that are maintained at the state level and at the federal level. They differ. And we also have a federal court system and a federal prison system, as well as a state and a court and prison system. Think about the Supreme Court. I told you that the Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. That's true, but every state also has their own Supreme Court. And in New York State, you would get to that Supreme Court in the same way that you would get to the federal court. You go through the appeals process, and a decision made at the Supreme Court in New York would apply to the whole state of New York, just like the Supreme Court, when they make a decision, it applies to all 50 states. There are also state prisons and federal prisons, and they're maintained separately depending on who they belong to. All right, two more. The implied powers. Have you ever implied something? You didn't really say it, but everybody knew what you meant. It's kind of the unspoken. Implied powers are just like that. The implied powers are also called the elastic clause. They are also called the necessary and proper clause. And the reason why you may see it called the necessary and proper clause is because of the language that was used in the Constitution. It literally says, the Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. And powers is written with a capital P. And what they're talking about are the powers of the Constitution. That means the powers of the executive, the powers of the legislative, and the powers of the judicial. The necessary and proper clause is this place in the Constitution where the Founding Fathers really said, we don't know everything. We don't know what laws are going to be needing to be made in 2023. We have no idea what that list would even look like, so we're not going to make one. Instead, we are going to say, as long as it's necessary and proper to carry out the Constitution, it can be passed by Congress. This gives the Constitution a lot of stretch. That's why it's also called the elastic clause. Some people are going to use this to really stretch the words that were written by the Founding Fathers, and others believe that it shouldn't be stretched at all. But implied powers really gave the Constitution the ability to live over time. Imagine if the Founding Fathers really did sit down and try to write the list of what laws could and could not be made. It would be truly endless, and there would certainly be pieces that they forgot. So instead, they wanted the Constitution to stand the test of time, and they put in there the implied powers through the necessary and proper clause. The very last part that we have here, and the easiest one to remember, are denied powers. These powers are strictly forbidden. No one, not even the state or federal government, can have these powers. This was that concept of a limited government. We had to put in there what could they not do. One of the examples of this is suspending habeas corpus. Habeas is Habeas, and corpus is Corpus. And what that means in Latin is present the body. And what this means to us is these are your due process rights. I cannot arrest you, throw you in jail, and never let you see a judge, never let you have a trial, never let there be a jury of your peers, and never tell you what you did wrong or how long you have to serve. That is a denied power. We have to let the people have their due process rights. Although I'd put a little asterisk next to that in your notes because we're going to see that tested over time. All right, that is all you guys have to listen to today. I will be back tomorrow. Please go ahead and do the classwork that is in Teams. First, you're going to read the speech by Strom Thurmond. Remember, we're going to be active readers while we're reading. We're going to highlight what stands out to us, what helps us answer the questions. We're going to underline. We are going to read the questions first so we know what we're looking for, and then you're going to complete the questions that are in the form. If you have any issues, please let me know.